Labour's mission of an economy built by the many for the many. And friends, what a contrast it is with that extreme trickle-down Tory budget last week. An economy built by the few for the few. And friends, if you've seen the news this morning, it's clear the Tories may believe in the markets, but even the markets no longer believe in the Tories. And friends, we owe it to the country to defeat this lot at the next general election. Now, friends, we meet here amidst three emergencies: an energy bills crisis facing millions of families, an energy security crisis, and the climate crisis. I say to you, these emergencies demand the boldest of leadership. These emergencies demand an energy policy for the people and for the planet. I say these emergencies demand a Labour government. Let's start with bills. Labour led the way in January with the call for a windfall tax. Labour led the way in August with the call for an energy price freeze. Now Liz Truss, she says she won't have a windfall tax because she says it's a Labour idea. She said that. You know, I think for the first time in recorded history, Liz Truss has got something right. The windfall tax is a Labour idea, standing up to the big vested interests so we can help the people of Britain in their moment of need. An energy policy for the people and the planet. Labour ideas, Labour values, Labour principles. Now, you know, the crises we face that I talked about might seem different, but they all come from one source. The climate and nature crisis is caused by the burning of fossil fuels. The energy bills crisis is caused by the fact that we're exposed to the roller coaster of fossil fuel prices. And the crisis of energy security comes from the global scramble for gas. So all these crises have the same ultimate cause: our dependence on fossil fuels. And all of them have the same solution: low-cost, homegrown, zero-carbon power for our country. You know, today the cost of solar and wind energy is 9 times less than that of gas. This is the defining truth of our age. This is the undeniable truth of our age. It is cheaper to save the planet than it is to destroy it. That's why I'm so proud to say a Labour government will make Britain the first country in the world to set and achieve the target of zero carbon power by 2030. It'll save £93 billion off energy bills. It will make Britain a clean energy superpower. And friends, we will do it by sweeping away that Tory dogma that is holding our country back. It is within our grasp. Let's hear it for doubling onshore wind, trebling solar power, quadrupling offshore wind, tidal power, nuclear, hydrogen power, and all underpinned by the best investment we can make: £60 billion over a decade to insulate 19 million cold, drafty homes, saving £1,000 off bills, cutting carbon emissions, mobilising thousands of businesses, and yes, friends, led by our brilliant Labour local authorities up and down Britain. That's what I mean by an energy policy for the people and the planet. Thank you. Thank you. Now, you know, what do the Tories offer instead? They tell us, after 12 years in power, after 4 Tory prime ministers, after all their promises, they say, and I'm not making this up, the energy system is broken. That's what they say. Friends, who broke the energy system? They did. Who banned onshore wind? They did. Who said cut the green crap and drove up bills? They did. Who slashed home insulation? They did. Very good. Who deregulated the energy market? Who Yeah, I've got more. I've even got more. Who deregulated the energy market and let 32 companies go bust? Friends, I've got an idea. If we want to mend the broken energy system, let's start by getting rid of the Tories who broke it. And guess what? With these Tories, fracking is back. The Tories banned fracking in 2019 because they said it was dangerous. Now they've moved the goalposts. Under the Tories, and I'm not making this up either, moderate earthquakes are just fine. That's their position. So I say to you, let every Tory MP and candidate be asked, where do you stand on dangerous, expensive fracking? Where do you stand on breaking your manifesto promises? Friends, let them try and sell. Let them try and sell their charter for earthquakes to the people of Lancashire, Yorkshire, the Midlands and communities across the country. We will hold them to account on behalf of the British people. And who do they say? Who do they say? Who do they choose? Who do they choose to be solemnly entrusted to look after the future of our planet? Jacob Rees-Mogg. 19th century Mogg. A man who says we should extract every last drop, he says, of oil and gas, even though it would mean 3 degrees of global warming. A man who says, and I'm quoting him, trying to forecast the climate is unrealistic. The cost is probably unaffordable. Friends, let's call it what it is. This is dangerous climate denial. If you want an energy policy for the 1820s, Jacob Rees-Mogg is your man. If you want one for the 2020s, we need a Labour government, friends. And let me tell you this, because I listened carefully to the debate. Our plans are not just about transforming our energy system, they're about transforming our economy too. You know, there's a global race on for the jobs of the future, and Britain under the Tories is losing it. Let me tell you about ITM Power in Sheffield. They're one of the world leaders in the hydrogen industry. They were looking at the UK for a new factory, but seeing the lack of support on offer from the British government, they now plan to go overseas. I say it must and it will be different under a Labour government. It's time to invest in Britain again, friends. That's why Rachel Reeves and I are today announcing a new institution that will take back control of Britain's economic destiny. Government as partner, investor, and yes, shareholder working with business. A new national wealth fund for Britain. And let me tell you what that's going to do. It's going to lead the world in hydrogen, lead the world in the EV revolution from the northeast to the West Midlands, lead the world in green steel from Port Talbot to Scunthorpe, lead the world in decarbonising industry from here on Merseyside to Grangemouth, lead the world in jobs from the southwest to Scotland in offshore wind. Good jobs at good wages with strong trade unions. That's what I mean by a Green New Deal. That's what I mean by an energy policy for the people and the planet. And friends, it cuts to a deeper truth. And I heard this so clearly in the debate. The goal of the next Labour government can't just be to tinker round the edges. The hour is too late. The moment is too serious. The next Labour government will deliver fundamental reform to the institutions of our economy. So we have an economy built by working people for working people. Friends, as it says on the party card, power, wealth and opportunity in the hands of the many, not the few. So let me tell you, here is the election choice. Lower energy bills with Labour, higher bills under the Tories. Energy security with Labour, energy insecurity under the Tories. Millions of green jobs with Labour, opportunities squandered under the Tories. Leading the world again in tackling the climate crisis with Labour, climate delay and denial under the Tories. Friends, these are the stakes. Don't let anyone tell you all parties are the same. Don't let anyone tell you politics doesn't matter. Don't let anyone tell you nothing will change whoever you vote for. This is our mission. This is our chance. Let's protect the people and the planet. Let's rise to this moment. Let's lead, and together let's transform our country. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ed. We now have time for just a few more speakers. Was there somebody from Scotland? Okay, I can see that one hand up. You come now, please, very quickly. And someone from the southeast? Okay, it was you, I think, on the end of the row there. Yes, you, who is just standing upright. So that's two of you I've called so far. Is that right? Just check. You're the person from Scotland, the other person that was there, and then
you need to come to the desk.
You need to come to the desk before you can. And there was a youth. Can I just check where else we've got? So is there anybody from the southwest that was indicating? You were from the southwest. Okay, you get to come. And I think this is going to be it for now, but please go ahead, Delegate.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Conference. I'm proud to represent Glasgow Kelvin CLP and the City of Glasgow. Thank you. Conference, Glasgow was recently dubbed in the press as Strike City, which I can assure you was thoroughly taken as a compliment. I urge you to support Composite Motion 1 and honour the work that our comrades and the trade unions and communities that support them have been doing in recent months. When Labour members and representatives get on a picket, we acknowledge our party's history and reassure the public that we retain our core values. Thank you. As the delegate from Sutton and Cheam CLP rightly acknowledged earlier on, the Shadow Cabinet at Westminster are the exception and not the rule. Labour representatives and leadership in Scotland and Wales have been loudly and proudly standing on the picket lines with striking workers across unions and industries. It's my great pleasure to support the motion that was moved by Unite and CWU, though I would have enjoyed the opportunity to take part in the compositing last night. Glasgow Kelvin CLP submitted a motion regarding strike action that was remitted by the CAC on the basis that it referenced Shadow Cabinet attendance on pickets, and this should be considered, quote, an organisational matter, unquote. The only reference to organisation that I want to hear from our most senior elected representatives is organising to help workers and their unions win. Victory to all striking workers. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's you next.
Hi, Conference. I'm Marie Tidball, Community Union Delegate. Conference, when I was last on this stage in Liverpool 4 years ago, I had my 6-week-old baby in a sling. Now my little girl is at school, and I'm standing here as the Labour parliamentary candidate for Penistone and Stocksbridge. The place where I grew up and call home. When I was a child, my dad, a councillor for Dodworth, was chair of Barnsley Passenger Transport. South Yorkshire had a world-class bus service, thanks to our Labour County Council. Labour knew then, as we know now, that buses are for the people. Labour's fair fares allowed you to travel from one side of our constituency to another, cheaply and reliably. In Penistone and Stocksbridge, buses are a lifeline which connects our families and our communities. But the Conservatives just don't get it. We were promised a London-style transport system. What we got was a bargain basement budget, getting half what they promised. Worse still, South Yorkshire didn't receive a single penny of bus improvement funding. A kick in the teeth for local people who feel like the current Tory MP has only, and I quote, put her head above the parapet when it is too late. And it is too late. We are already seeing services being seriously reduced, like our SLL1 Supertram service link and the number 57. Only on Saturday, I spoke to a mum in Uterbridge who was worried about these cuts to services and how her 14-year-old son was going to get to school. Labour will put people back in control of our buses and at the centre of our bus services, making them greener, fairer and more reliable, so that young and old in our rural areas, our towns and villages across Penistone and Stocksbridge are not isolated, so that children can get to school, so that our shift workers can do the jobs we rely on them to do for fair fares and safely. Every single one of us has the right to use buses to travel to work and see our families and friends without using a car. Public transport is fundamental to achieving social justice and tackling the climate emergency. As the MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge, I will help secure the public transport system that our communities deserve and that our planet desperately needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's now my great pleasure to invite Jonathan Reynolds MP, Shadow Secretary of State for Business. Oh, sorry. It's not my great pleasure to do that yet. I'm going to have another speaker. Apologies.
Okay, cool. So, hi, I'm Isabel Saxby, first-time delegate, and I'm representing West Devon and Torridge. Yeah, thank you. So I'm representing West Devon and Torridge. So West Devon is rife with second homes, terrible transport links and rising costs, and it's not a surprise considering our MP is Geoffrey Cox. So I want to know how people are expected to compete with millionaires. TUC found that over a fifth of workers in the southwest are earning under the real living wage. In West Devon, we have the lowest pay in Devon and the third worst pay in the UK. Torridge has the second highest proportion of workers earning below the living wage out of all local authorities in Britain. It's the Tories that have caused this. The rise in child poverty over the last 12 years, empty shelves, tax increases, lower pensions, pay freezes, benefit cuts, and raw sewage spewed into our rivers and onto our beaches. Places like Devon and Cornwall are more than just holiday destinations for city dwellers. They can be hives of economic activity that offer decent jobs in advanced engineering and green technologies, as well as our core industries in healthcare, education, and culture. But this all needs proper investment and attention from a national government if local workers are to get a chance at earning a proper living. Labour is here for the many and not the few. So please support the motion 5 on a £15 pay, because it's essential. But thank you so much. Delegate.
you. It now really is my great pleasure to invite Jonathan Reynolds MP, Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Industrial Strategy. Thank you, John.
Conference, thank you for the chance to address you today. We meet at a time when the challenges facing our country are very grave indeed, when you're worried about how your communities and your families are going to get through the months ahead. And I know it's hard to feel optimistic when things are so tough, but serving in this role has given me cause for hope. And I know a fresh start with Labour can rebuild this country. I'm thinking of the steel workers I met in Port Talbot who are ready to make the green steel customers want. The automotive workers in my hometown of Sunderland who have the skills to make the electric cars we need. The scientists I met at Imperial College who have the ideas to solve some of our greatest challenges. We've got some brilliant people in this country. But what we don't have is a government committed to a domestic steel sector or to building the battery factories we need. We don't have a government who values the collaboration of scientists across Europe. We simply don't have a government that's on people's side. And that is what we must change. There was a time when the Tories believed they were the party of business. Now, they're just in the business of parties. After 12 years of misrule, they have failed British business. On their watch, business investment is the lowest in the G7. Economic growth is set to be the lowest in the G7. We've had the worst squeeze to real wages of any country in the G7. And don't just take my word for it. Let's ask them. They admit it. The new Chancellor said they have presided over a vicious cycle of stagnation. The new Prime Minister has said our public services are in a state. Frankly, when the Tories find out who's been running this country for the last 12 years, they are going to be furious. And that is now the big choice in British politics. Everyone agrees the last 12 years have been awful. The difference is we choose to look to the future, while the Conservatives are dusting off the failed policies of the past. In the face of an energy crisis, a business investment crisis, a climate crisis, who have they picked to meet these challenges? As Ed said, it's Jacob Rees-Mogg. One newspaper said he'd be better suited to running a museum than the business department. Frankly, Conference, museums are far too important for that. And now the Tories want to claim they've got the answers to the problems they've created. And it's higher bankers' bonuses, it's cuts to corporation tax, deregulation, picking fights in divisive politics. And it won't work. George Osborne's cuts to corporation tax didn't increase business investment. And we all know what deregulation is code for. Cuts to working people's rights. Cuts to environmental standards so more sewage ends up in the rivers. A race to the bottom, which good businesses and working people never win. Now, I agree with the Tories on one thing. The last 12 years have been a disaster. But while they want to double down on their mistakes, we've got a real plan to make it better. Conference, I'm pleased to announce today that we are launching Labour's industrial strategy. And it's a real industrial strategy, with ambition and the means to achieve it. Our industrial strategy will deliver clean power by 2030, taking the action needed on the climate emergency and keeping good jobs in Britain for decades to come. We'll harness data for the public good, ensuring it isn't just held by corporate gatekeepers, but used to benefit us all. And we'll bolster our national resilience, ensuring our supply chains and working people are never again left so exposed to global shocks. And finally, we'll value the care sector for what it is, an essential part of our economy, ending the job insecurity too often associated with this vital work. We've got the policies to make it happen. Fair pay agreements will be to the next Labour government what the national minimum wage was to the last one. And Conference, I pledge to you now, there will never, ever be a scandal like P&O Ferries under a Labour government. Because a proper industrial strategy, our New Deal for working people, our reform of business rates, our targets for greater spending on research and science, these provide the real alternative the country needs. Labour knows that's how you grow the economy, not on the backs of working people or rewarding bad practice, but through vision and leadership and real partnership to make economic success a reality. No one can deny Britain faces some significant challenges. But rather than shrink from these challenges, the role of government is to meet them head on. Many of you lived through the 1980s, when Tory governments left people on their own in the face of massive industrial change. We cannot, and we must not, allow this generation of Tories to do the same in response to the challenges we face today. Good work, good wages, a fairer, greener future. That is what we can deliver. And I ask for your support of every one of you to make it happen. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. We will conclude the Better Jobs, Better Work debate and take the votes after our next speaker. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves.
Thank you. Thank you, Conference. It is a privilege to stand here as your Shadow Chancellor under Keir Starmer's leadership. But I know what a responsibility this is too. We are facing a national emergency. Energy prices up. The cost of the weekly food shop up. People's wages not keeping up. On Friday, the Chancellor had an opportunity to set out a serious response to the cost of living crisis. And he failed. What did we get instead? A tax cut for the wealthiest 1%, increased bankers' bonuses, and more than £50 billion piled onto the national debt every single year. They didn't just break their own fiscal rules for the 10th time in 12 years. In one go, they borrowed more than in any single budget since 1972. With inflation already high and interest rates already rising, the message from financial markets was clear on Friday. And this morning, that message is even more stark. Sterling is down. That means higher prices as the costs of imports rise. The cost of government borrowing is up. That means more taxpayers' money will go into paying the interest on our government debt. And in turn, that means the cost of borrowing for working people will now go up too, with higher mortgage repayments for families. And all for what? Not to invest in the industries of the future, not for our NHS, and not for our schools, but for tax cuts for the wealthiest. A return to trickle-down economics, an idea that has been tried, has been tested, and has failed. Why should my constituents in Leeds West, why should people in Merseyside pay for tax cuts for those who are already the wealthiest? It's not what anyone voted for. It's putting our economy in danger, and Conference Labour will fight it every step of the way. Conference, let me tell you what I believe. I believe that hard work should be met with fair reward. I believe that strong public services are the backbone of any decent society. I believe that inequality divides and holds us back as a country. Conference, I believe that the task of building a fairer society is a moral responsibility, and more than that, it is the route to a stronger economy. The truth is at the heart of Labour's plans for growth, and today I want to tell you why. Last April, on a cold spring evening, I knocked on the door of a constituent. When I reached out to shake her hand, it was purple and freezing cold. Already back then, she was afraid to put the heating on, struggling to get by on the small pension that she had built up through a lifetime of work. As energy bills and inflation rise even higher, I often think of her. Conference, that is the stark reality facing people all around our country today. And while the Prime Minister spent months denying the need for action on energy prices, Labour was calling for a freeze on the energy price cap. Labour was calling for an end to the indefensible premium paid by families with prepayment meters. And crucially, Labour was calling for a windfall tax on the unimaginable profits being made by the oil and gas companies. Because a proper windfall tax would mean that working people didn't have to foot the bill. But the Prime Minister is content to let energy giants pocket the cash and leave your children and your grandchildren to pick up the tab. Under these Tories, those with the broadest shoulders carry the lightest load. And not by accident, but by choice. Conference, it is time for a government that is on your side, and that government is a Labour government. The effects of Putin's war have reverberated around the world, and we will not waver in our support for Ukraine. The causes of this crisis are global, but our unique exposure to rising energy prices is a result of the choices of Conservative governments. Inaction on insulating homes, inaction on renewable and nuclear energy, and the sheer irresponsibility of closing our gas storage facilities. We are feeling the consequences of a 12-year Tory experiment in unilateral energy disarmament. And what's their answer? Lifting the ban on fracking. Conference. Fracking is dangerous, it is bad for the planet, it won't even reduce our bills, and with Labour it will not happen. Here is our alternative, our Green Prosperity Plan, to provide the only sustainable solution to the energy crisis, to free ourselves from dependence on Russia, to invest in solar, in wind, in tidal, in hydrogen and in nuclear power, and to pass on to our children a fairer and a greener country. This is a moral responsibility, and it's an economic necessity. On climate change, the costs of inaction today will mean far greater costs tomorrow. I refuse to leave our children to pick up the pieces of our failure. Conference, I will be a responsible Chancellor. I will be Britain's first Green Chancellor. Ed Miliband has just set out how the next Labour government will cut energy bills for good by generating all of our electricity from clean sources by 2030. But our Green Prosperity Plan is about something else too. It is about economic growth, because British businesses are falling behind in the global race for new industries. And that matters. It matters that the largest offshore wind farm in Scotland has its blades made not in Scotland, but thousands of miles away. It matters that the rest of Europe is powering ahead with electric battery factories, and we are stuck in the slow lane. It matters that Germany, France, and the US are making the running with green hydrogen, but we are not. We have the ability, but we want the jobs here. We want the factories here, and we want British businesses to take the lead. Here is the deal. The next Labour government will create a national wealth fund so that when we invest in new industries, in partnership with business, the British people will own a share of that wealth, and the taxpayer will get a return on that investment. Wealth flowing from jobs in electric battery factories, in the West Midlands, the North East, the North West, and the South West. Offshore wind driving investment in our ports, from the Humber to Southampton, East Anglia to Belfast. Clean steel, with jobs in Rotherham, Sheffield, Scunthorpe, Cardiff, and Port Talbot. And carbon capture in our industrial heartlands, in Grangemouth and in South Wales, in Humber and in Teesside, and here in Merseyside too. Because conference, when I say I want to buy, make and sell more in Britain, I mean it. What you will see in your town, in your city with Labour, is a sight that we have not seen often enough in our country. Cranes going up, shovels in the ground, the sounds and the sights of the future arriving, secure, skilled jobs for plumbers, electricians and joiners, for designers, scientists and engineers, wealth that will flow back into your community and onto your high street, wealth that the British people will own a stake in, wealth that is invested in our country's future. That is a real plan for climate, that is a real plan for growth, and conference, that is a real plan for levelling up. A zero-carbon economy, made right here, made in Britain. It is time for a government that is on your side, and that government is a Labour government. And conference, what about the Tories? 6 different plans for growth in 12 years, each announced with great fanfare, each making no difference. A library of failure. Conference, they've had 12 years. Have they got growth up? No. Have they got inflation down? No. Have they got child poverty down? No. Have they got the NHS waiting lists down? No. And have they even got the debt and the deficit down? No. Conference, it's 12 years of failure. And now, they have replaced levelling up with trickle down. An economic philosophy inadequate to a modern world, and a moral philosophy inadequate to a decent society. Trickle-down economics is a very simple idea, that if we just slash taxes and regulation, we will unleash investment and growth. That how wealth is shared doesn't really matter. Vast gaps between people and places, no importance. Workers' rights, consumer protection, strong public services, all worth sacrificing. That wealth is just created by a few people, a few businesses. It's why, at the same time that ministers lecture low-paid workers about showing restraint, that they can't restrain themselves from removing the cap on bankers' bonuses. I dare any Tory MP to tell a nurse or a care worker to their face that what our country needs right now is bigger bonuses for bankers. It's true, trickle-down is a very simple idea and a very wrong one. Not just wrong, because it isn't fair. Wrong too, Conference, because it doesn't work. Trickle-down is wrong because how wealth is shared does matter to growth. High inequality strangles the spending power of working people. It piles its social costs onto our public services. It suffocates potential. Trickle-down is wrong because in a turbulent world, businesses need government as a partner. Trickle-down is wrong because strong institutions and robust public finances provide the foundations for a strong economy. And trickle-down is wrong, Conference, because a strong economy needs strong public services. We will defeat the failed ideas of the past with the focus, the ambition, and the ideas for the future. Conference, here's the truth. Wealth doesn't trickle from the top down. It comes from the bottom up and the middle out, from the talent and the efforts of tens of millions of ordinary people and from thousands of businesses. Our economy needs the most productive, most high-tech businesses to thrive in Britain. And we all rely on what I call the everyday economy. On transport workers and delivery drivers, on supermarket and retail workers, our NHS and care workers. Don't let anyone tell you that they are not wealth creators too. They are key to our security as a society. And yet too many of them are amongst the most insecure, overworked, underpaid, undervalued. The Tories' trickle-down ideology has nothing to offer them beyond longer hours, lower pay, and less respect. Earlier this year, I met a family in Worthing, a mum and dad working 5 jobs between them, struggling to make ends meet, constantly juggling work and childcare. As a family, they only got half a day a week together. They felt that any hope of buying their own home had evaporated. Good people, working hard. And do you know what the mum said to me? She said, "You just wonder if you're doing something wrong." Conference, something is profoundly wrong. And let's be clear, Liz Truss, we've not fallen behind our neighbours on growth, on productivity or on pay, because British workers lack graft. It's not working people that are the problem. Conference, it's this government that is the problem. I'll tell you what a growing economy needs. Rising wages so that money flows back into vibrant high streets. Parents with the time to thrive at work and spend time with their children. Families with enough savings to weather a storm. And people feeling the confidence to take risks, to change career, to learn new skills or start a business. So, with Labour, there'll be no bonfire of workers' rights, as the Tories intend. As Angela Rayner announced, we will introduce a new deal for working people with strengthened rights fit for the times we are in. And that's not all. On day one as Chancellor, I will write to the Low Pay Commission with a simple instruction that the minimum wage will be set at a level that reflects the real cost of living. Conference. The last Labour government delivered Britain's first ever national minimum wage. The next Labour government will introduce a genuine living wage. how we will give working people security, and that's how we will grow our economy too. It's time for a government that is on your side, and that government is a Labour government. Here's another thing about growing a 21st century economy. It's no longer enough, if it ever was, for government to simply get out of the way. The challenges of global instability, of pandemics, wars, and climate crisis demand that government work in partnership with business. If I were Chancellor right now, I would bring together a National Economic Council that will bring together industry and trade unions, so working people and businesses were at the heart of economic decision-making. I have been privileged in this job to visit businesses across our country, from Rolls-Royce in Derby, pioneering research into carbon-neutral aviation, to Oxford Nanopore, leading work on DNA and RNA sequencing, right through to local businesses like Castleton Mill, once a key part of West Yorkshire's textiles industry, and now a collaborative space for freelancers, remote workers and startups. The world is changing fast, but the British capacity for enterprise, for innovation and for hard work remains undimmed. When I talk to business, they don't tell me that their #1 priority is corporation tax. They tell me about the need for properly targeted investment allowances, the need for workers equipped with the right skills, the need for certainty and a sense of direction from government, and yes, the need for a sensible working relationship with our European neighbours. So we will take those issues head on, starting with the biggest tax problem facing British businesses. Our unfair, outdated system of business rates punishes high street businesses to the advantage of online giants. So Labour will level the playing field. We will abolish business rates and replace them with a fairer system fit for the 21st century. That new system will mean that businesses would get revaluation discounts straight away, rather than waiting for years for their money back. And here's more. Today, Jonathan Reynolds launched our modern industrial strategy that recognises the importance of businesses at the high-tech frontier and of our everyday economy. It sets out a mission to make our economy more secure. We will use all powers at government disposal to buy, make and sell more here in Britain. We will make Britain the best place to start and grow a business, guided by the work of our Startup Review, headed by Lord Jim O'Neill. And we will give our nations and regions, mayors and local leaders right across Britain, the tools to shape their own future. In Labour-run Wales under Mark Drakeford, in our city regions and all around the country, we are seeing the difference that Labour can make in power. And Steve Rotherham, thank you for the leadership that you show here in Merseyside. And conference, if you're remotely serious about growth, then you've got to make Brexit work. Our agriculture and our food industries rely on trade right across Europe, but we have a deal that doesn't even include a veterinary agreement. We are pioneers in creative industries, but we have a deal which ties them in knots over visas. We are the second largest exporter of services in the world, but we have a deal that doesn't include the mutual recognition of professional qualifications. So we will fix the holes in the government's patchwork Brexit deal. And instead of picking needless fights with our largest trading partner, we will work together with our neighbours and our allies in our national interest. That is Labour's approach, proudly pro-worker and proudly pro-business, supporting innovation, sharing opportunity, reviving our high streets. Conference, it is time for a government that is on your side, and that government is a Labour government. I am proud to have started my career as an economist at the Bank of England. Its operational independence is an enduring contribution by the last Labour government to Britain's financial stability. Growth and social justice must be built on firm foundations. Yet this government has undermined the bank's independence, sacked the respected permanent secretary to the Treasury, and gagged the Office for Budget Responsibility. The Chancellor and Prime Minister, meanwhile, resemble two desperate gamblers in a casino, chasing a losing run. But here's the thing. They're not gambling with their money. They're gambling with yours. They've lost credibility. They're losing confidence. They're out of control. And I've said this before conference, but be in no doubt. There can be no return to austerity. It has left our country poorer, our public services at breaking point, and our public finances in tatters. I make this promise to you. Labour will not waver in our commitment to fiscal responsibility. That is why I set out the fiscal rules for the next Labour government a year ago. Every policy that Labour announces and every line in our manifesto will be carefully costed and fully funded. Last year, I told this conference that I was more than happy to take on the Tories when it came to economic competence, because I know we can win. I'm now wondering whether they even plan to show up for the fight. It's becoming clearer by the day. Labour is the party of economic responsibility and the party of social justice. Conference, it's time for a government that is on your side, and that government is a Labour government. Now, we need a growing economy. We need a growing economy to pay for modern, sustainable public services. But a growing economy needs strong public services too. This is personal to me. My mum and dad were primary school teachers. I'm really proud of that. My sister Ellie and I used to play for hours in my dad's classroom while he worked late into the evening, because he wanted the kids that he taught to have the very best start in life. And this was all in the face of Conservative governments, hostile to the very idea of public service. I went to school under those governments. I remember what it was like. This is why I joined this party, and it is why I am here today. Strong public services are the foundation of a strong society. And conference, we owe everything to those who work in our National Health Service. But we also know that our health service today is on its knees. It is a social priority, and it is an economic priority. In the last 3 years, 500,000 people have left the labour market. More than half of those due to long-term illness. So, as Keir Starmer set out a year ago, we will guarantee access to mental health treatment within a month to anyone who needs it. Here's more. We need strong, sustainable public finances alongside strong, sustainable public services. So our priority is not tax cuts for the wealthiest few. It is securing our public finances and investing in our public services. Conference, I can tell you, with a Labour government, Those at the top will pay their fair share. The 45p top rate of income tax is coming back. And here's what we'll do with that money. The next Labour government will double the number of district nurses qualifying every year. We will train more than 5,000 new health visitors. We will create an additional 10,000 nursing and midwife places every year. More than that, we will implement the biggest expansion of medical school places in British history, doubling the number of medical students so our NHS has the doctors that it needs. It will fall to us to fix the damage that the Tories have done. We have done it before, and Conference, we will do it again. Know that these are Labour's priorities. Strong public services to support people and grow our economy. A greener, fairer Britain, with jobs for people in Britain. Industries owned by the people of Britain. Profits shared with the people of Britain. Pro-business and pro-worker for a stronger economy, where you do well. Because when you do well, Britain does well. Hope and opportunity, whoever you are, wherever you live. That is Labour's vision for Britain. That is what we are fighting for. Let me tell you, it's time for a government that is on your side. That government is a Labour government, and be in no doubt, Conference, that government is on its way. Thank you. Thank you, Conference. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you, Conference. Thank you, Rachel. So we now have one final speaker. So if you could very quickly make your way from the FBU, also in the darkened area of the room, then we will take that final speaker. And while you're making your way, I will just make an announcement. I'm not trying to make you leave the hall, but you do need to know this. The UEFA Women's 2022 trophy is at Conference and will be, will be on display at stand 73 from 4 o'clock. Is the speaker from the FBU on their way? Yes, brilliant. And then we are taking the votes, so please make sure, if you're leaving, you leave very, very quietly, but don't leave.
Hi, comrades. Steve Wright from the Fire Brigades Union. Firstly, I would like to say from the outset, my union, the Fire Brigades Union, supports striking workers, the dockers, the posties and the railway workers. And we have been, and we always will be, on the picket lines with you. And I will repeat the call that has been made today. Will the Labour leadership, will Keir Starmer, if he can still hear me, join those picket lines? Will he join our picket lines when we move to strike action? I'd like to thank the CWU and Unite for bringing Composite 1, which importantly calls for public ownership. And let's not be ashamed of calling for public ownership. We are socialists after all. And we wouldn't have firefighters going to food banks if the current system was working. The pandemic only amplified the skewed power relations in society. We must not go back to the old system. We must build a fairer, more equal society that gives everyone a stake, a voice at work and a hope for a better future. We know that we can never trust the ruling class and the Tory government to protect workers. They continue to show their utter contempt for workers, and we must prepare for their future attacks. Workers should and will not pay for this crisis. The Labour movement is stating this loud and clear in this conference hall, and so should the Labour Party. There are attacks coming our way to our union, and we must build our resistance and our movement to fight them. Comrades, another threat still lays dormant that hasn't been mentioned too much today: the climate emergency, the industrial issue for my union, and ultimately a class struggle that we have to continue